Good morning, everybody. Tara here with the Wifey Wake Up podcast, and I have an intriguing topic for you today. If your husband was cheating on you, do you think you would like to know? And this is assuming you didn't know to begin with. And what I mean is, would you want that to bring that to the surface? Would you even want to know? Number one. And if the answer is yes, would you be able to let it go? And what I mean is, considering he was remorseful, he said he would never do it again. Do you think that you would be able to essentially, right, forgive him, but also in addition to that, just let it go? And number two, if you wouldn't want to know, do you think that your relationship could actually survive without this mountain that develops from, sweeping so many things under the rug, right? Even if it's just one party and the other one stumbles upon it continually. So I bring this up because sometimes it's the extreme cases that can help us in our day-to-day lives. How would you handle the extreme case? It makes the smaller things so much easier. And this question also came to mind. I was listening to a podcast recently in the men's kind of relationship education sphere, and I'm not even going to name the podcast, but I was appalled that the blatant suggestion from the first sentence, first few words out of his mouth was, "Men, if you cheat, don't tell your wife." And the justification was that women don't have the ability to not keep prying or not keep that in the back of their minds and hold it over the husband. And it's logical, right? I mean, if the tables were turned, the man, if he didn't just divorce her, because men are more just kind of cut and dry that way, of course he would be thinking about it all the time too, in his own way. So I shared this podcast with my husband, and I was trying to keep my opinion to myself because I really wanted to hear what he had to say before I shared my thoughts and opinion with him. And I was just trying to keep it to myself. And he said, "Well, just don't cheat," right? Okay, great. I have an amazing guy. Of course. I'm so glad I heard something like that come out of his mouth. And so, yeah, number one, yeah, just don't cheat. But the question, what I'm getting at, is something actually deeper. It's a deeper topic, and it's about those little things, the smaller things, not the big infidelity things that happen in marriage, but the smaller things that can keep getting swept under the rug. Maybe you are sharing them with each other and you're holding it over each other's heads. Maybe you're not sharing it with each other and it's building a tension between the two of you. It's that classic example of you're inches apart on the couch, but you're miles away. And that's what I wanted to actually share about an incident that happened in, a time period in our marriage, my husband's marriage, where we were that proverbial couple, right? Inches away on the couch, but miles apart from each other. And what it was is there was no cheating, there's no infidelity involved, but it was actually, I think, really common stuff that happens in life and why couples grow apart. And that's why I wanted to share it with you. It was a time period in life, and I've talked about this time period in life before. There were multiple kind of dark night of the soul things happening in my life. So it wasn't just that I was unhappy with my husband, kind of when things compile upon each other and you're just kind of miserable in multiple ways. But one of those things is that I was not seeing life come to fruition as I hoped and expected, and in my life with my husband. And, I had expressed it in a number of ways, and that I thought was reasonable, but what I didn't realize is how much it was wearing down on my husband. And we had, of course, had a number of arguments, or just even difficult conversations. But what was happening is that those conversations weren't getting anywhere. And if anything, they were just kind of firing us up even more. And so we both, in hindsight, realized what we were started to do is we would keep it to ourselves. I would keep to myself the things I was dissatisfied with and my lamentations. And he was keeping to himself how he was really doing the best that he could at the time and how he was really I can't put words in his mouth, but from what I understand, in a way, kind of saddened that I wasn't the wife, the woman that he had initially married, who was optimistic about the future and so into him, and no matter what, right, he could do no wrong. And as time went by, my expectations, whether reasonable or not, that's to be decided, really, in the one that the responsibility is put upon to live up to that expectation. But whether those expectations were reasonable or not, he he didn't feel that he was getting the loving wife that he originally had, and his expectation that it would continue in that way. And so he likewise started keeping things more to himself. And I'm here to tell you, if you get anything out of this podcast, it is that not communicating is not the answer. That's why and for two reasons, that a podcast that I had listened to really appalled me, is that it was encouraging, first of all, kind of not necessarily promoting, but like condoning cheating, and that if you do cheat, that it's definitely okay not to share with the wife. Just excuse me one moment. So I think the cheating already should be off the table. So that aside, but then not communicating is definitely not helpful, no matter how difficult the topic. So that's really the point of what I want to get across in this podcast. So here's what happened, without all the details, because I want to keep this short, is that we were keeping our thoughts and feelings separate in order to not keep coming together and having these arguments, right? That seems logical. That makes sense. Okay, let's just not talk about the things that bother each other or bother us. And what happened is we just kept, we would be in the same proximity. We'd even go out to dinner together. But the subjects that we would talk about became less and less and less, because first it was those original topics that would infuriate us, each of us, and then together. And then it would be a topic that could relate to that topic. So then that topic was off limits. And then there was another topic that happened to be attached to that topic. So we just kept decreasing the amount of things that we could talk about until it was really superficial stuff. And what was happening inside of each of us, which was evident of our blow up, is what I'll call it, is that we were containing our thoughts and feelings that actually really needed to be talked about. We needed to resolve, and they were just bubbling, stewing, just getting all stopped up inside of each of us, so that on one fateful day, it all came blowing up to the surface. Now, again, I'm not sharing all the details, first of all, for time's sake, but this is a common narrative I think a lot of, if not all, couples go through in one degree or another. And there are different phases, right? It's the initial phase of you're over the honeymoon phase, and you're starting to see the things that you don't appreciate in the other person. You start telling the person what you don't appreciate, what you're not happy with, and then you start if not blowing up in some way or separating, you start distancing from each other. And so it may seem really counterintuitive, because especially if you were already having difficult conversations and you were already getting in arguments and blowing up at each other, it can seem logical that, well, obviously that's not working, so that's not the solution. But you have to keep communicating. If you don't keep communicating, like I said, you'll grow distance, or eventually it will all come to the surface. And fortunately for us, when it did come to the surface, it's kind of like, if you see reminiscent of a scene from a movie where an explosion goes off and the people are standing, or they come up from the rubble, and they're all full of dust and tears and sweat and scrapes, but they're intact. They're, thank God, intact. But their ears are ringing, they're stunned, but they realize at some point, wow, we survived this, and now we've got to clean it up. Now we've got to further survive and make sure this doesn't happen again. Or how do we continue to survive? And in a few quick points, continuing from there, sometimes that blow up makes it easier to, as you're picking up the pieces, realize kind of what happened along the way. And so in some odd way, sometimes that's necessary. But hopefully you can have maybe the little blow-ups along the way and actually realize those things instead of having to have the huge blow up and pick up the pieces. And here are a few clues on how you can get those clues, get those indications ahead of time rather than having to pick them up off the ground and go, oh, this is what she was saying, or this is what he was saying. Okay? So, first of all, be caring. I know sometimes when you are just up to here with whatever, or you're just full of it, right? It can be difficult to feel like you care about that other person, but it's absolutely essential. An exercise you can do briefly is to go back to the beginning part of your relationship and reminisce about your first times together. Your first date, your first, special memories. That can really help to, if not rekindle those feelings, at least get back to seeing that person the person that you fell in love with. Next is be curious. Be curious about what they're actually saying, what they're trying to convey to you. So the first part, being caring, will really help with the curious part, because when you care about someone, it's easier to be curious rather than them telling you something and you being on the defensive and not taking in what they're saying. Next would be considerate. Be aware of your facial expressions, the words and the tones that you're using. That can really help a conversation move on as well. Next is share. It's going to be difficult to share certain things, but it's the whole point of what I'm trying to convey, right? If you don't share at some point, it'll either distance you or it will blow up at some point. And I realize that there are certain topics that are very, 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 very difficult to share. For example, if there was infidelity, there are certain details that may just not be necessary. And or just as the person is ready to share or hear any details. Another thing would be trauma. Maybe the person previously experienced trauma in some way, with or without you. And the details of it, first of all, they may not even realize. They may be coming to the surface through different phases of life. And it's difficult for them to face, first of all, and reveal and converse about. And so it also may be that they just need time and space, but sometimes they might need a little bit of a nudge too. And that can be a delicate topic. But just realizing that sharing, there's a certain dance to sharing, but certainly not sharing, just flat out not sharing, is not the clue. You can I think you can feel when there needs to be a little bit kind of like a pull for more. Like something is kind of stuck. It's not out of, oh, I need to hear more details and then I'm going to use it against this person. It's just to help loosen the situation. And then, of course, listening. With all those aforementioned tips, listening with all that considered, and that will certainly help you get beyond the point of just getting inflamed in these situations. And then I have a couple more things that can help you. So I hope you're taking notes, because I wish I knew these things years ago, and that's why I'm sharing them with you, so that you can have the shortcut version and get over these hurdles without in a faster time frame and without getting hurt. So a few more tips. Ask yourself, what if my spouse, what they're telling me is actually the truth? Sometimes when we're so hurt, we're so frustrated, what they're talking about, we just kind of push away. Like, I don't even want to hear that. You're tired. I'm tired. You're this. I'm that, and you don't even want to hear them. But just consider that what they're saying is the truth. What they need from you, or what they need in life, what they're perceiving is the truth. Just consider it. And then ask yourself, is how I'm listening to them, is this how I would listen to my best friend? Again, very similar. When we get in these states where we just are just irritated, we lose patience. And a good way to reflect upon this is, am I listening to my spouse, the person I say I love the most, that I dedicated my life to? Am I listening to them as well as I would listen to my best friend in a similar fashion, with patience, kindness, love, consideration? And then another thing that you can consider that can help with this is if we were early in our relationship. So, before you're married or in your first couple of years of marriage, honeymoon phase, would what my spouse is asking for, would what they're asking for be reasonable or not? Sometimes, especially as life goes on, so many things are piled up on us. And that one, last thing, the straw that breaks the camel's back is like, nope, that's it, no more. But really, if we assess our life, maybe we need to take out a few other things in life and really start putting our spouse in a priority seat in our life again. And like we did when we were first together, we would cancel plans to be with them. Now, granted, I know life was typically simpler then, right? In many ways, I don't even have to mention that. You can imagine. Life was simpler when you first met. But we lose touch of each other when we don't prioritize each other. So this was a long way, or maybe not a long way, but I wanted to really get to the point that not communicating is not the answer, that you have to have the difficult conversations. And those tips that I just mentioned, I think can help you go a long way. Let's see. Yeah, so I get a comment here. Most couples live in a state of frozen conflicts. Yes. Meaning that they freeze their conflicts after being exhausted from fighting. Yep, that's exactly what I was talking about. This leads to cheating. Yeah, certainly I've heard people cheat for different reasons, but of course, then you start looking elsewhere. People tend to, our nature is, if I can't go this way, I'll find a different route, right? And yes, it is so difficult to have these conversations, but it is necessary. So I really encourage you to take those tips at the end that I mentioned into your conversations. And I'll have more in future podcasts and more specific type of conversations, but give those a try. As always, please like, subscribe, share this with a friend that, maybe came to mind you think this would be helpful for. I love hearing your comments, guys and ladies. I think it really helps us to hear the different points of view. And if you want to go deeper, if you want some one-on-one work, you can contact me. My information is in the show notes. And last but not least, I have a tip jar there also. If you found this helpful and would just like to leave a little tip, I would love to take out my best friend, my hubby, out to coffee, lunch, or a dinner. So I will see you there in the chat. I'm going to put a close to this, trying to keep these as short as possible, but I'll see you all in the chats. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye.